It's 5:05 and welcome in to a Thursday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Earlier this week on Monday, North Carolina Attorney General Jeff Jackson joined a lawsuit with 21 other states seeking to prevent funding cuts to the National Institute of Health. That's NIH. They, of course, have been in the news a lot over the last 4 or 5 years. This followed action by a federal judge in Massachusetts granting a temporary restraining order blocking the funding cuts under the new Trump administration. The new AG in North Carolina said in a press release, quote, "This attempt to slash funding for research awards that have already been granted violates the law and would cost North Carolina's public universities hundreds of millions of dollars every year going forward. It would permanently diminish higher education in our state and severely damage many of our state's core industries, causing major layoffs. The court was right to stop this federal overreach, and I'll keep fighting to protect our state's economic future." Last Friday, NIH announced that it would cut funding for indirect costs of grant-funded research projects to just 15%. Indirect costs include administrative costs such as maintenance, operation, equipment, personnel, and accounting services. The new NIH policy reads, quote, "The United States should have the best medical research in the world. It is accordingly vital to ensure that as many funds as possible go towards direct scientific research costs rather than administrative overhead." Judge Angel Kelly of the United States District Court of Massachusetts gave the Trump administration a Friday deadline to file an opposing argument. That's tomorrow. And a hearing was scheduled for February 21st, according to rollcall.com. The NIH is the main funding source for medical research grants within the United States at an eye-popping $45 billion being spent on more than 50,000 grants in fiscal year 2023. And of that $45 billion, more than 9 went to indirect costs, that the administrative bloat that you heard there in the NIH's comments. Looking at the complaint, it says effectively halting research to cure to cure and treat human diseases will directly impact the well-being of the plaintiff's state citizens who are the beneficiaries of the research creating treatments such as modern gene editing, vaccines such as the flu vaccine, and cure diseases like cancer, infectious diseases, and addiction. So Jeff Jackson, the Democrat Attorney General here in North Carolina, has joined this lawsuit. The 20 other states are in there as well. As you can imagine, states like Michigan, Illinois, California, New York, Nevada, New Jersey, and many other blue states all in on that lawsuit. You can read the full suit and check out some additional details. Katie Zender's got the story this morning over at carolinajournal.com. It's now 5:08. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. As we sit here a couple of months removed from the November election, we are continuing to get details in regards to campaign finance, and we've got some pretty eye-popping numbers this morning about out-of-state donations to Democrats and the Democrat Party here across the state of North Carolina. To walk us through those numbers this morning, Brianna Kraemer, carolinajournal.com, joins us on the News Hour. Brianna, in your headline, you say 70% of donors that came into Democrats were out of state. Is that true?
Yes, Nick, that is correct. The 2024 election cycle in North Carolina highlighted some pretty stark differences in fundraising between Democrats and Republicans, with the Democratic Party relying heavily on out-of-state donors, while the GOP drew more support from their in-state contributors. So we looked at the State Board of Elections data, and we found that Democrats raised about $5.4 million from individual donors, which is including $4.2 million that came from outside of North Carolina. So that's 78.5% of the money raised came from outside of North Carolina. And then 21.5%, or about $1 million, came from in-state donors, reflecting obviously a huge dependence on fundraising from mega donors or large-scale donors out of state, coming from blue states into North Carolina to really impact the 2024 elections in North Carolina.
And I guess maybe we shouldn't be surprised by this, Brianna. Leading up to the election, literally the entirety of 2024, there was so much emphasis on states like North Carolina, one of 7 major swing states. And I guess if you're a major Democrat donor in a super blue state, you're better pouring your resources into a swing state where you can make a bit of a difference rather than dumping it into a place like New York or California or Jersey or some other place where those election outcomes are already pretty certain.
Yeah, absolutely. That is 100% correct. And we saw that here in North Carolina. We are a huge swing state, especially for the presidential election. And then other key races as well. The gubernatorial race was huge. And there's other races that were in the national spotlight as well. And so the money coming in was coming from states where they were securely blue already. And so their money could be better well spent here in North Carolina to actually influence the outcome. So looking at the Republican side, we saw that the party raised $3.9 million from individual donors, which is 71% or $2.8 million of its fundraising coming from within North Carolina. So the exact opposite from the Democrats, who had over 70% out of state, and then Republicans over 70% from in-state. So a complete different outcome between the two parties. And then 28% or just over $1 million came from out of the state. So very, very different in the two parties and how their fundraising ended up from supporters within the state versus out-of-state influences.
I can presume some of this is also because of the prominence of former Governor Roy Cooper. He was the head of the Democrat Governors Association. He was very high up within the Democrat Party. There was even rumors when Joe Biden dropped out that he might be tapped to be the vice president. I can only imagine that he had probably a significant amount to do with all of this out-of-state money from Democrats pouring into North Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. His, influence here was very impactful, of course, as well as other key leaders in North Carolina. Josh Stein, he helped a lot, and his family as well. And then we had other very familiar names that were giving to the other committees or PACs as well. Some of the names, including George Soros, were on the list of, these big donors contributing to the state. But of course, looking ahead to that raises some questions as to what's ahead in midterms, because it's not too far. And then we're going to be looking into the 2026 elections and midterms, and then we have a Senate seat up for grabs. And so that raises questions on fundraising and how the two parties plan to go into that and where their support really lies, because Republicans are looking at support directly here in the state. And then you see the Democrats looking out of state for that support. So, definitely different in the ground game versus the finances.
Well, and you bring up the 2026 Senate race. There's been rumors for literally years now, while he was still in office, that Governor Roy Cooper would likely take a little bit of a break and then throw his hat into the race for 2026. Brianna, you can imagine if it's him and Tom Tillis on the ticket, the copious amounts of cash that are going to be flowing into North Carolina will probably break some records.
Absolutely. Two individuals that are very well known, have been in politics for a very long time, will definitely be competing with a lot of money backing both of them in North Carolina. So, we can expect to see the same kind of situation where a lot of money is going to pour in from out of state, but also, of course, in state as well.
You can read more details on this story by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com. Brianna Kraemer joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:14, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get a look at traffic on this Thursday morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Good morning, Nick.
It's 22 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Don't forget that you can watch the show streaming live weekday mornings on our Carolina Journal YouTube channel. You can also take the show with you on demand by checking it out in your favorite podcast app. Just search for the Carolina Journal News Hour, tap the subscribe or follow button, and you'll get a new show delivered each and every weekday morning. It's the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. Download and subscribe now. North Carolina Labor Commissioner Luke Farley unveiled his new elevator inspection certificate with his picture and signature Wednesday morning at the Department of Labor. In an exclusive interview with CarolinaJournal.com, he explained that the certificate holds significance as one of his campaign promises to North Carolinians. Farley told us, "My priorities for elevators in North Carolina are both safety and accountability. The people of North Carolina deserve to know who is accountable to them for elevator safety. That's why I made a promise during this campaign to bring back the commissioner's picture to the certificates because I wouldn't put my name or my signature or my picture on a certificate unless I was willing to stand behind the work of the department." The first of the new certificates was installed in the Department of Labor building yesterday on Wednesday, with plans to install them across the state. However, Farley told Carolina Journal that the certificates would be changed only when an elevator was due for inspection, as changing all of them just to update the picture and signature would be a waste of taxpayer dollars. This is the first step in the department's plan for elevator modernization that will be rolled out over the next few years. Farley continued by saying, "We'll address current and future needs. People get on an elevator and a lot of the times they're supposed to be inspected annually, but they see that it's not, and that's not acceptable to me. So we're going to have a plan coming out in the next few weeks that we will, quote, make elevators great again, or mega." Farley believes elevator inspections that are years out of date undermine confidence in the government overall and indicates whether the government can perform efficiently and effectively. Farley said, "We're going to be very serious about bringing those up to date and not just restoring confidence in the elevators, but the ability of government in general to perform its job that it has been tasked with doing." His new moniker is the Elevator Guy, reminiscent of former Labor Commissioner Sherry Berry's nickname of the Elevator Queen. You saw her name for years in elevators across the state of North Carolina. Farley says that's fine with him. At the February Council of State meeting, Farley pointed out that only 6 meetings were originally scheduled for the year and called for, quote, reinstating meeting dates for each month. While he understood that former Governor Roy Cooper would cancel some, having so few meetings didn't sit well with him. Farley told Carolina Journal, "I instantly saw and was not happy because I knew how much work we have to get done, including things like approving insurance payments for Helene, state government buildings that are damaged and as part of state property, and as the state fire insurance fund continues to roll out, payments out of funds that are approved by the Council of State meeting. We need more meetings." In the February meeting, the 10 elected council members were approving nearly $3 million for 2 Western North Carolina universities, Western Carolina University and App State. However, Farley said that approval should have taken place in January, right after the members were sworn in. Luke Farley is glad that Governor Josh Stein heard his and some other concerns and changed the meeting schedule. He says, quote, "I give the governor a lot of credit for hearing these concerns and making sure that we are taking care of the people's business in a timely manner. And I think it bodes well for our working relationship together. I've never worked with the governor before. He has never worked with me, and we're going to have to get to know each other a little bit. But I think the fact that he heard our concerns and is willing to address them is a good sign for our ability to work together going forward." Looking ahead, Farley said his office is working on a plan to improve worker safety in North Carolina, which has been his top priority and was a major campaign pledge as he went across the state of North Carolina gathering votes. As the department works on and deals with the concerning Occupation Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, for things like workplace safety. Farley said, "We're working hard to implement our 3-point plan to fill our safety inspector vacancies. We're doing this by proposing a 10% pay raise for those folks. These are hard jobs, and they are and there are perpetual vacancies there. And when you have jobs that are just going unfilled, you have to ask yourself, am I paying benefits competitive with the market? Because this is the number one reason that a job will not get filled." The department is also looking to improve its educational programs. Farley told Carolina Journal, "Instead of just wagging a finger at a business, we want to help them do the right thing. We have wait times right now that are 95 days, and that is unacceptable to me. We need to cut them to 45 because if you're a responsible business and you want to see the Department of Labor there helping you, we need to be able to do it in a much more quick fashion than we are right now." And finally, the department is looking to expand its recognition and incentive programs, with Farley saying most of what you hear are stories of people who didn't want to do what they were supposed to. There are many people out there who are doing right by their employees, and we're going to make sure that we shine a light on that. So Luke Farley giving a exclusive interview over to carolinajournal.com. You can read the full story by visiting our website this morning, and also the note that there are going to be more Council of State meetings. That information published by Luke Farley on his X account. The next meeting is coming up here in just a couple of weeks, March the 4th, and then a meeting April 1st, May 6th, June the 3rd, July 8th, August 5th, September 2nd, October 2nd, and November 4th. That is the schedule as it lists right now. And then there's also a December 2nd date on there. So moving from 6 months to every month as we work through the rest of the year. Again, you can read additional details this morning by visiting our website and checking out the certificate over at carolinajournal.com, where it's now 528. 529 News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. We will get another look at traffic. We'll head on over to the traffic center and update with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks a lot, Nick.
It's 5:35. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Good Thursday morning to you. The North Carolina Board of Education, which is largely composed of appointees by former Democrat Governor Roy Cooper and our Democrats serving on that board, voted to urge lawmakers in the state legislature to put a moratorium on the Opportunity Scholarship Program and spending for the upcoming school year. The board wants the extra funds sent to traditional public schools, a narrative that you have heard a lot over the last couple of years from Democrats in North Carolina. The resolution passed 9-2 with Republican State Treasurer Brad Briner and State School Board member Olivia Oxendine being the two no votes. Oxendine was appointed by former Republican Governor Pat McCrory. We are requesting the moratorium, or the recommendation rather, reads, quote, "We are requesting that a moratorium be placed on the expansion of the Opportunity Scholarship Program and offer no new awards to students beginning in the 25-26 fiscal year and redirecting funding appropriated for new Opportunity Scholarships for 25 and 26 and 26 and 27 fiscal years to addressing the needs in our public schools." The board's recommendation included reallocating funds to address public school priorities such as high-impact tutoring, hurricane-affected school facilities, increasing teacher pay, and addressing $12.8 billion in infrastructure needs. They also proposed funding for free school meals, special education, technology, and mental health resources. During the meeting, Olivia Oxendine said that the proposal took her off guard. She told the board, quote, "I will always be a supporter of public schools, but I will also be an extra supporter of what is the best interests of the students. This is supreme with Olivia Oxendine. Let it be placed on my tombstone. Always about the child, not about the system, not about the school, but about the child." The Opportunity Scholarship Program is the state's voucher meant to enable families to choose a private school education for their child or children. Each scholarship is valued at between $3,458 and $7,686 each year. Applications for the 25-26 school year opened last week. After the Republican-led General Assembly made the program universally available regardless of family income, the rate of applications and scholarship awards surged statewide. For the current school year, nearly 80,000 students are receiving a scholarship. An additional $625 million is going to the program for the upcoming school year, meaning that the number of students could surge even more if they are to apply. As I mentioned, applications for the program are currently open for the next school year. You can head on over to carolinajournal.com and click on our story this morning. The headline is Dems on the NC Board of Education ask NCGA to put moratorium on Opportunity Scholarship funding. And there's a link at the end of the article if you would like to apply or read more details about Opportunity Scholarships. It's now 5:39 on the Carolina Journal News Hour, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We are continuing to track details this morning in the high-stakes race for the North Carolina Supreme Court. To get an update on where everything stands between Jefferson Griffin and Allison Riggs, Mitch Kokai with the John Locke Foundation has been walking us through this over the last couple of weeks. Mitch, appreciate the time this morning. Some news late last week on Friday, some updates in the early half of this week. What's the latest that you're looking at this morning?
Well, right now we're in the appeals stage in the state court system. We had that big major development on the previous Friday when the Superior Court Judge William Pittman looked at Jefferson Griffin's challenges of 65,000 plus ballots and said, no, I don't accept any of these. I think the State Board of Elections was correct to reject your challenges. So now Judge Griffin is appealing that ruling. He is trying to get sort of a quick timeline from the State Court of Appeals to get this resolved. Normally, that's the type of thing that in the appeals process, it could take weeks, months, even a year or so to get something done. But he's asked for an expedited timeline that would have briefing wrapped up by February 25th. Interestingly enough, while he is asking for that, according to his own court document, the lawyers representing the State Board of Elections and Justice Allison Riggs, the Democrat in this race who leads Griffin by 734 votes. Apparently, if this case stays in the Court of Appeals, they are asking for a little bit more time. They're not asking for the full weeks and months, but they would like to have about twice as long for the briefing as what Griffin is looking for. So that would take things well into March. And then the other thing that Griffin's latest court filing suggests is that either the State Board of Elections or Allison Riggs or both are planning to file a bypass petition that would take the case out of the hands of the Court of Appeals and move it directly back into the hands of the state Supreme Court, which is interesting in some respects because the folks representing the State Board of Elections and Justice Allison Riggs didn't want the case in the Supreme Court some weeks ago. They had said, hey, the Supreme Court should throw this out. You'll remember that Justice Anita Earls and one of the Republican justices, Richard Dietz, voted against giving Jefferson Griffin any kind of stay. They all agreed to send the case back to Superior Court, but if the Supreme Court agrees with this bypass petition, it could be coming back to the Supreme Court. And we should remember as well that if there's some sort of ruling that goes in favor of Jefferson Griffin on any of these challenge ballots, both the State Board of Elections and Allison Riggs have already filed court paperwork saying that they would take that case back to federal court, which the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals left the door open for that to happen.
So there's obviously a lot of moving pieces and parts here. It is a little interesting, as we covered throughout the earlier half of this week, that the Democrats would be trying to potentially bypass the appeals court and go straight to the Supreme Court. Mitch, and all of Carolina Journal's reporting in the past, that is a 5-2 majority-controlled Republican court. What do you think's behind that?
It's interesting to speculate about it. I think one reason might be because the State Board of Elections and Justice Riggs and the Democrats, who are also watching this very closely, got the ruling they wanted from the Superior Court. So if for some reason the state Supreme Court were to split and not be able to come up with a ruling, then the court ruling that would stand would be the Superior Court ruling, the ruling in favor of the State Board of Elections, Justice Riggs, and basically the Democratic establishment. So that's the status quo for them, is liking that ruling. You don't know what would happen at the State Court of Appeals, which has a Republican majority. They vote in 3-judge panels, and so it's very likely that the panel at the Court of Appeals would have, if not 3 Republican judges, at least a Republican majority. And so there's a potential that things could flip from the ruling that we saw at the Superior Court level to be a ruling in Griffin's favor. And then if the case got to the Supreme Court and they split and couldn't come up with any kind of a ruling, because remember, it's only going to be 6 of them voting. Allison Riggs will be recused since it's her seat. If they split 3-3 and the Court of Appeals had ruled in favor of Griffin, then the final ruling could be in favor of Griffin. So I think perhaps the folks who are working on this as the legal team for the State Board of Elections and for Allison Riggs think, well, maybe there's a chance here we're going to get either a favorable ruling or a split ruling at the Supreme Court, and we would like to have that better than taking our chances with the Court of Appeals and seeing what happens there.
You mentioned about this possibility, it hasn't been done yet, to bypass the appeals court. Who does that go to, and who makes the final decision whether or not that can actually happen?
What would happen is a petition that would be filed with the Supreme Court, and this has happened before in many cases when folks figure the Supreme Court is going to make the final decision on a case one way or the other. So a case sits in the Court of Appeals, but one of the parties in the case, or potentially both parties, if they would like to get it resolved relatively quickly, will file a bypass petition with the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court has to decide whether to take that case or whether to leave it with the Court of Appeals.
It's a great update this morning. We appreciate it. Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:45, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get another look at traffic on this Thursday morning with the great Boomer Von Cannon.
Okay, thank you, Nick.
Hot.
Good morning again. It's 5:51. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Yesterday in Raleigh, North Carolina House members advanced a Republican package to boost state recovery funding after Hurricane Helene, as committees worked out details on how best to spend another $500 million to deal and address with the historic storm. The House Budget Writing Committee voted for the latest spending proposal, which would emphasize repair for damaged homes, private bridges, and roads, assistance to farmers who lost crops, and rebuilding infrastructure adjacent used by small businesses. The GOP House leader had unveiled a version last week, but several amendments adjusted the measure in a special Helene Recovery Committee on Tuesday. A House floor vote is expected next week on the full package. Republican John Bell, the House Rules Chairman and co-chair of the Helene Recovery Committee, announced yesterday. The package remains at about half of what new Democrat Governor Josh Stein sought in new recovery spending earlier this month from the legislature, where he requested over $1.7 billion in spending there. Stein's package contains several initiatives to the House plan that he claims currently lacks there, including money to recompensate local governments in the mountain for lost or spent revenues, and for two various business grants designed to help small businesses directly. State GOP leaders will have their own competing spending ideas and they will figure out and how that goes out in negotiations with their House counterparts. Both Stein and Republican lawmakers want to get more Helene spending out the door early this year to address immediate needs. Additional funds are expected in the two-year state budget plan, which should go into effect if everything runs on schedule July the 1st. The legislature has already appropriated close to $1 billion since last fall for Helene aid in the weeks after it made landfall in late September. House Speaker Destin Hall told Tuesday's committee meeting, quote, "This is just the next step in the process. Somebody asking me earlier, how many bills are we going to need to do this? And my answer is, and I know all of you feel the same way, it's going to be as many as it takes for us to get done to rebuild Western North Carolina." North Carolina state officials reported that Helene caused damage to over 74,000 homes, as well as thousands of miles of both state-maintained and private roads, bridges, and culverts. State officials projected the storm caused a record $59.6 billion in damages and in recovery needs. Remarkable amount of damage from Helene. Congressional legislation approved in December and other federal actions are projected to provide over $15 billion to North Carolina for rebuilding. That's what has been approved and appropriated right now. The State House proposal seeks to maximize federal matching funds, avoiding mistakes from previous storm recovery efforts and preventing the distribution of too much money to programs ill-equipped to get it out the door. According to John Bell, he said this body is very strategic in what we're trying to do. Adjustments that House Republicans made this week to their preliminary bill include shifting $75 million to create a state agricultural department program to address agricultural crop and infrastructure losses as it relates to ag, the largest industry in North Carolina. Another $60 million initially earmarked for repairs of state facilities would be used for other proposals, and nearly all of it, $55 million, would help small businesses, although not in the form of direct payments as Stein and other Democrats want. Instead, the proposed infrastructure grant program would allocate money to local governments to repair qualifying infrastructure needs like utilities, broadband, and sidewalks that would benefit small businesses trying to reemerge from the storm. Bell said Wednesday that a grant program could be open to abuse by businesses that aren't located specifically in the damaged region. With Republicans falling one seat short of retaining a veto-proof majority in the General Assembly after the November election, Stein and Democrat allies may be able to yield some more leverage to fashion a package more to their liking. So that is the latest that we are tracking on this first Helene recovery bill out of the 2025 legislative session. And with that, we covered this yesterday, but I'll remind you once again that North Carolina, the state auditor's office, Dave Bolick and his team have launched a new online dashboard that allows users to track Hurricane Helene recovery in western North Carolina. The data tracks a bunch of counties out west, more than half a dozen out west, and it shows things like how many households are displaced. It gets data from the FEMA Shelter Assistance Program. It looks at numbers of people that are seeking assistance, not utilizing assistance, and that FEMA data is updated on a weekly basis. You can view that dashboard this morning that, according to State Auditor Dave Bolick, will continue to be updated with data as it becomes available by visiting auditor.nc.gov/Helene. That's auditor.nc.gov/Helene. You can read both of those stories this morning, including the Helene Recovery Dashboard story, by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com. That's going to do it for a Thursday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We are back with you again tomorrow morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.